evening, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Since I Was Young podcast, a podcast dedicated to all things Heart of Midlothian. This week we will be discussing somewhat briefly the victory against Livingston that took place at the weekend, and our sort of main topic of conversation will of course be devoted to the transfer window, which closed, slammed shut. All of these different adjectives that you hear in relation to the transfer window. It came to an end on Monday evening, and at time of recording, this is Tuesday evening. Let me get my dates right. The 2nd of September we are on at the moment. So, as I say, we'll be discussing our thoughts on the transfer window, the ins, the outs, and anything that we feel maybe the club could have done that they didn't do, and we'll just kind of see where we go with it. Before we do get started, as is coming up on the screen right now, feel free to head down to the description and find our social links. They are all in there. Head across, subscribe, follow, like, all the things that you do across the socials. I say it all the time, your support is massively appreciated and is helping us grow this little community that we seem to be gathering at this point. But yes, without further ado, John, and all that said and done, and also before I start, find us on YouTube and Spotify. There we go. I've ticked that one off the bingo card this week. But anyway, John, how are you getting on?
Doing all right, man. Yeah, off yesterday, off today, back at work tomorrow. So I'm enjoying my last few hours of freedom before I get back into the grind.
Sounds perfect. Well, we can kind of, as I said at the beginning there, the Livingston game is where we kind of want to start with the game that took place on the weekend. I don't know about you. There wasn't really a lot to write home about. Derek McInnes began with the 3-5-2 system again. There were a few personnel changes. Spittle probably being the most notable player brought into the fold from the starting 11. The 3-5-2 system has its place and has its critics, and I'm probably one of them at the moment for reasons that we'll touch on as we go. But in terms of the Livingston game overall, to give it a quick summary, the first half was pretty non-existent. Both sides had a bit of a scrap. I'd say we controlled it, but Livingston obviously getting the goal to take them ahead after I think it was about 27 minutes. The young lad Smith absolutely roasted Milne. One of those games that Milne just didn't look at it at all, which is a bit of a shame because he's had a very good start to his time at Hearts thus far. So it was a bit uncharacteristic to see him get beaten defensively. But the goal itself from Livingston, we'll just dive straight in. He cuts in off the wing and nobody closes him down, which is frustrating when you have a three-man midfield and the one man that is supposed to shuffle across and close the space down didn't do it. And then I think it was Finley's side of the defence as well. He just sort of turned his back a little bit and didn't engage. And the less we say about Xander Clark's involvement, I think the better. With the late transfer business that we've done, I'm not sure how much more of Xander Clark we will see. I think he's finally got a bit of competition for his place, which is probably a good thing. But at the moment, he just screams of a goalkeeper lacking in confidence. And the goal, I'm not going to dwell on it, but I do feel that Xander could have done a lot better. Do you have anything else to kind of say on that particular incident?
I would completely agree with you on that. He should have done better. That wasn't struck with particularly great pace. Again, this is another one that it wasn't like it was a right into and it wasn't nestled straight into the corner. This is a very stoppable shot from that distance, and a keeper at his level should be, taking care of that. It's not the first time it's happened this year. So yeah, as you say, with regards to late transfer business, I'm pretty pleased that he will have some competition moving forward because I feel like he does need a bit of a boot up the arse. To be honest, he's not been at his best the last couple of games. That's not to forget how poor the defence was once again on that goal. One of the things that we sort of highlighted when Derek McInnes took over was how much he enjoys his team to press on, both sides of the ball. And that's not something we're seeing right now from Hearts, especially at the back. In defensive midfield, in defence, we are leaving massive gaps of space for opposition players to sort of saunter into and do whatever they want from. And we have surrendered a couple now of really poor goals from distance that a club of our size and stature and level and with the talent that we have should not be conceding. So that is a massive concern for me early on. That being said, I'm looking for things to pick up because we've had generally a very fantastic start. I don't want to sound like a doomsayer or anything like that. It's 10 points from 12 is excellent. But that is something we need to iron out and iron out as quickly as possible. We've got tougher opposition on the horizon, as we'll talk about later. And if we allow that kind of space, it will be exploited and we will not have a lot of fun going forward if we continue to be this lax at the back. That's pretty much my thoughts on the first goal. Milne
I think
gets a bit of a pass because he's, like you say, he's been very good so far. He had an off day. It's going to happen to the best players. I would hope that that's not a sign of things to come. I don't think it will be. I think Milne is a pretty decent player, and he's shown that. He might just not particularly enjoy playing at Almondvale or whatever the hell they call it. There's myriad factors that go into it, but yeah, that was a poor goal to give up once again. Shades of last year, which is something that I think all of us would prefer to move past as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think to kind of just sort of sum up the first half, I know we're kind of rattling through the events of the game, but you know,
I can sum it up in one word, mate.
There wasn't a lot. Yeah, there wasn't a lot to write home about in the first half in particular. I think we had a lot of the ball, but we just failed to really have that sort of penetration in the final third, which is something that we've seen quite a lot, particularly in first halves. I think, you know, we've spoken about it before, and other outlets have as well, about the fact that McInnes is still kind of rotating and still trying to figure out who fits where and who works where, and what his best combinations can be. And of course, you know, like you said there, we've got harder games to come, so there's only so much more tinkering and changing he can do before you have to start looking at these big games on the horizon and going, well, you should probably know your best team by now, or at least know the players that you can rely on the most to carry out your instructions. But as has become the norm for us at the moment, there were changes at halftime. Halkett was hooked, Kiziridis came on, and I'm just falling for Alexandros Kiziridis a little bit more every day, for his on the field stuff, but also his off the field kind of demeanour and just his confidence and the way he conducts himself in media and things like that. And I'll touch on that in a minute, but he was brought on at halftime and the system changed to a back four, and immediately we looked better. Immediately we looked much more balanced, we looked much more assured and in control, and we got players into dangerous positions and kind of forced Livingston to actually do some defending. And obviously they crumbled in the end, but his first involvement, he was subbed on obviously at half-time, and after 47 minutes he flashes a ball across the box, and everyone's favourite striker at the moment, Claudio Braga, just throws himself at it, puts a head on the ball, he's brave, and he just puts himself in a position where he's going to divert the ball into the net. Again, Braga's another one that I'm absolutely loving at the moment, the maverick that he is, but the impact of Kiziridis was just so obvious. And this is kind of the point that I want to make, and I'll maybe talk about it a little bit more when we kind of go through the transfer window. But Kiziridis is getting to that point for me where it's, yes, he's had a fantastic impact off the bench a couple of times now, but when does he become a starter? When does he say, right, do you know what, I've done what I can off the bench, like I'm doing what you're asking me to do, put me in from the start? And maybe, I mean, I don't know, we'll have to wait and see how he is when he starts. Maybe he is going to be one of these players that is better utilised off the bench later in a game when the opposition's tiring, because the pace and directness and energy and just threat that he carries is massive, and we saw that for that first goal.
Well, I think that in order to be effective as a starter, you have to start games. Professional athletes are very finely tuned. Their bodies react to, the reps that they get. If you're only getting 20 minutes, half an hour of a game every week, and then you're suddenly thrown in at the deep end and you're expected to play 90 minutes, you're going to be blown out your arse by the end of that 90 minutes. It's the way it works. Like, in order to get to the point where he's ready to start games, he kind of has to start starting games. It's like a chicken and the egg sort of thing almost. It's like, in order to build up the sort of stamina that's required to play 60 to 90 minutes and be effective, you need game time. That's the thing that gets you there. There's a difference between fitness and match fitness, as we know. It's all well and good that he's doing such a good job off the bench for 20 minutes, or even 45 minutes, as the case has been. But if you expect him to start a game next time out and play 70 to 90 minutes, it's not going to guarantee that he's effective, because that's not really how it works. He hasn't been playing that length of game up to this stage, so I do think that he needs to be starting games. I think he's easily our best wide player from what we've seen so far. I think him and Braga clearly link up very well, and I think that when we start to see him, as long as he's played in the right system and in the right position, he can be an absolute game changer. And he would agree.
Well, he would. I think. I just did a quick fact check on myself there while you were chatting. He did start against St Mirren in the cup, but the less we say about that game, the better. He was subbed off after 45 minutes, so we won't touch on that anymore. But his impact obviously off the bench. He did what McInnes had asked him to do: go on and be direct, and like I said, forced Livingston to do some defending. We then had a couple of chances to a couple of notable chances. Claudio Braga dragging a shot wide, Claudio Braga hitting the post when it seemed easier to score, which obviously came off the back of a driving run from our new Brazilian midfielder, Agu, who we'll talk about in the sort of second part of this week's episode. We just improved a lot in that second period. We looked, like I said, a bit more balanced, a bit more assured, and a bit more in control. Kiziridis at the heart of that. But there were, good performances across the pitch. I'm not just going to put it solely on the feet of Kiziridis. I thought that Laurie Shankland had a very good game. I think his development of his game in terms of being that guy that drops a little bit deeper. I know people don't like it when he drops into the 10 because they're like, you're our number 9, you should be in the box scoring goals. But when he's got guys like Braga and Kiziridis in with the system change at half-time, these are the runners. We saw it when he had Josh Ginnelly with him. We saw it when he played with Vargas occasionally. If there's pace around Shankland, he will find it. And I think, that was a big part of it, a big part of the second half. He had a hand in the second goal, the winning goal. What a scrap. I don't know how the ball kind of around in there. Livingston failed to clear it. It falls to the feet of Shankland, who then passes it side to Kiziridis, and he just wraps his foot around it and bends it around the goalkeeper to send 3 stands of the Tony Macaroni Arena into absolute bedlam. 6,000 Hearts fans in attendance, which is just phenomenal. I know it's not exactly a difficult trip. It's not exactly a long journey for a majority of Hearts fans to get to Livingston, but it certainly shows the level of enthusiasm for the club at the moment. And they were, the fans were rewarded for their support with that last-minute winner. I spoke about Kiziridis in terms of his off-field personality, and I think his comments that he's made in the media in recent times have been fantastic to hear. He was asked if he feels like Hearts could challenge the top 2 this season. He said, yeah, why not? And it's ambition, it's brave, and the media obviously spin that to say, they're ready for a title challenge. He thinks they're ready now, etc., etc. He's being ambitious, he's being honest, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. I think the feeling, Derek McInnes said it as well, that obviously it's very early in the season, but when you're given an opportunity to go top of the table, albeit for a short period of time, you should want to try and take that. And I think that is something that clearly oozes through the team. And I think, Kiziridis, his post-match comment when he was asked about his winning goal, he said something along the lines of, I told Shankland to pass me the ball, I knew I would score, I'm very good. Just little remarks like that, and I'm like,
yeah,
this guy has come to Hearts, and it's a step up from where he was playing before. And I think, again, we'll talk about the transfers and such, but I think the Jamestown model of finding these players from kind of untapped markets and bringing them to Scottish football and giving them that exposure, it's life-changing moves for these guys. And I think you can see that hunger to do well, and that can only stand us in good stead as a team if these guys do well. Obviously, there's going to be some that don't, or there's going to be some players that come in and it doesn't quite work for them. as we've seen some depart already in recent times. Not Jamestown arrivals, but there have been some departures for some players that I would suggest fit into that category of being brought in and maybe just not quite living up to the standard that we need for Hearts to move forward. But yeah, big fan of Kizaridis. Big important impact in the game. Nice to get 3 points. I'm fed up with these late winners, though. I'm fed up with scoring goals in the last 5-10 minutes. It's not good for the old. It's not good for the old heart and the old blood pressure at this point.
It's not always going to work either. That's something that we need to bear in mind. It is a very precarious place to be sort of wire walking across. Like we need to be winning games earlier especially against some of the teams we've played against. But it's as simple as that. We are a far better team than half these clubs that we've faced, and we are making it so much more difficult for ourselves than it really should be. There have been some games. There have been games where it's been a scrap, and I think that the Livingston game was one of those. I go back to the Motherwell game though. We ended up 3-0 down before we did anything of any note in that game. Mm-hmm. It's too late in the game when you're 3-0 down to be able to live up to pre-match billing, which is that you were the favourite and you should have won, especially at home. This game against Livingston, if we had shown up and if we had picked the right system from the start, it should have been a walk in the park, because the second half was markedly different than the first. Once again, second half we were by far, I feel, the better team. We had put way more pressure on them than they could handle. And you mentioned yourself, Braga alone had 2 or 3 chances outside of the goal that he scored to win it for us. If he had converted 1 or 2 of those, suddenly it's a 3 or 4-1 game.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not really, it's not sustainable. I don't think the whole comeback kings thing, because it only takes once for it not to work, and people are going to start to turn on them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point and kind of puts us sort of nicely into the next segment of this week's podcast. But I think, like I said at the start, there will come a point when Derek McInnes has to stop the tinkering, has to stop the experiment, and has to sort of pick a system and stick with it. And
I think if I could just jump in there, some would argue, and McInnes had his detractors when he took over. He wasn't universally welcomed. Some would argue that the time for tinkering should have ended a month ago.
Oh no, I don't
probably
disagree.
A valid concern. It's probably a valid concern. I feel like we have so much talent. This squad is brimming with talent. Some of the additions that we've made have been fantastic, but we still haven't figured out the system, and we still haven't managed to fire on all cylinders for 90 minutes. It's concerning. No. It is concerning.
What I will say, kind of in sort of my response to that, I think that it's good to be able to play multiple systems. It's good to be able to function in multiple ways, but I feel like there is one particular area in that 3-5-2 system that we've still not got right, and that being the right wing back position. But again, we'll touch on that as we go. I don't want to kind of jump too quickly into it. But the last point I had on the Livingston game was the referee, Duncan Nicholson. I thought he was very much inexperienced. I think he showed that. I think the second half in particular kind of was a little bit stop-start. There was yellow cards kind of flying all over the place, which I didn't really feel were necessary. But I kind of like to just add a little bit in about the referee, because I've been told multiple times that we don't talk about them enough, and sometimes we don't really want to have to talk about them, and if we're not talking about them, it's pretty much a good thing. But
I mean, I feel like we talked about referees incessantly last year. I feel like I had several rants. I feel as though I alone had several rants about referees and how useless they are. By and large, Scottish referees are still shit. A few of them that seem to be coming through are not as bad. There's not much else to say about referees.
No, I think that's it. I think people probably...
Rest assured, folks, if there's an issue with referees, I will make a point of it. But yeah, so far, so good. What can we say?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, like they say, that the Livingston game, we'll wrap it there. It wasn't a classic. It was far from a classic. However, a last-minute winner from Kizaridis secured us 3 points, and for at least a short term, put us top of the table with 10 points from our opening few games. But I spoke there at the end there just about the system and the situation with the 3-5-2. We'll dive into the transfer window now. Obviously, as I said at the start, we are recording this on Tuesday evening. The transfer window closed yesterday, Monday evening, Monday the 1st of September, 11 p.m. It's shut, slammed shut, as people like to suggest. Hearts' business finished with 11 players in and 11 players out. Two of the players that went out, however, were loanees that have since returned to the club, and I assume will potentially be heading out on loan once again.
One of them already has.
Oh, right, okay, perfect. Well, we can kind of touch on that as we go along, but in terms of the transfer window overall, we spoke at the end of last season in our sort of squad review episode, and the board had the tagline, Andrew McKinley had the tagline of promising significant change to the starting lineup, or to the squad, shall we say, from last season to this, and I think that was entirely necessary, to say the least. Do you feel they have delivered on that significant change? Is that a silly question?
I think there's been signs of it. I think it's too early to make a concrete judgment. There's been signs that in some areas, I think in some areas, you absolutely have upgraded. You just have to look at Braga and Kiziridis. I mean, even an Ocean McKenty as well, who's a guy that's, when he plays in his right position, he's one of the finest midfielders that I've seen played Scottish football this year so far.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I was just about to jump in there and kind of throw my 2 cents at that, but
because of how big a whole right back is, I struggle to say for sure that it's been delivered.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely signs that it might be the case. I just feel like it's a bit too early. I think we need to see a few more weeks of this group, and we need to see what the settled squad is going to be before we can really make a concrete judgment. It's difficult to say because we still don't know what our first 11 actually is and what system we're supposed to be playing. I think that for me is the frustrating thing.
We've seen, in terms of the incomings, we've seen a majority of them. There was late deals, late arrivals for Alexander Schwolow, who that's how I'm assuming you pronounce his name, Schwolov, perhaps with the German W at the end being a V. I'm dragging on my standard grade German to get me through that one there. Also, we of course, without it was an interesting move, and it was something that I did not see coming, was the record-breaking arrival of 23-year-old Brazilian Aguiu. I'm going to continue to call him that until someone calls me out and tells me exactly how to pronounce his name. I know he was asked in his little interview that he did for the social media channels after he signed, but I'll level with you, I watched it and I've forgotten. So, but I'll definitely be boning up on that because I feel like we might be talking about him quite a lot based off his cameo against Livingston. You're right. We have signed a lot of players. There has been significant change for me. I feel like the club have delivered on that, and obviously bringing in Derek McInnes was a significant change. You look at it defensively. Defensively, we bring in Christian Borkovic, Stuart Finlay, also arriving, of course. I'm going to put Ocean McKenty in the defensive arrivals category because he's predominantly played at right back, whether he likes it or he doesn't at the moment. We've obviously brought in Alexander Schwolow, who has been brought in to challenge Xander Clark for that number 1 jersey that we spoke about previously. Other options and other players that we've not really seen a lot of yet, I would suggest Thomas Magnuson, Sabakar Jota, and Landry Kabori. 3 players that I think have a lot of intrigue about them, and I think they're 3 players that could be very good once they settle and acclimatise, but perhaps it's going to take them a little bit longer than some of the others. Obviously, as well as that, we can't ignore Elton Kabangu, who was with us last year, who has returned on a permanent deal. Again, another one we've not really seen as much of this season as I thought we might have, because obviously we know what Kabangu can bring to the table. So I thought maybe we'd see him a little bit more at the start of the season, but it's kind of been like you said, the Braga and Kiziridis show thus far, and I'm not complaining about that in the slightest. A number of outs, I'll rattle through them. Obviously, we had Liam McFarlane, who went on loan to Alloa and was then brought back following the goalkeeping injury to Ryan Fulton. James Penrice obviously left for AAK Athens. Lewis Nielsen has left. Adam Forrester left on a cooperative loan to St Johnstone and then returned to sit in the stand. Gerald Taylor, his loan was not converted into a permanent deal. Aidan Denham departed. Macaulay Tate has also left the club. George Grant, Jan Danda, Barry Mackay, and on deadline day, Musa Drama left Hearts. I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit with what I kind of wanted to talk about. Deadline day is always a bit scrappy, a bit kind of frantic for some clubs. Obviously, we've done the majority of our business by that point. However, with a squad size of 34, I was expecting maybe a few more outs than what we saw. I'm not going to lie. I think Musa made sense to depart. And obviously, as we record, the window is still open in some countries, so there may still be some moves available for some players. I know that there was a lot of sort of media reporting about Kenny Vargas potentially being another one that might secure a loan elsewhere or a permanent departure, depending on what's available. But time will tell on that. Perhaps by the time of when this episode goes live, there may well be an update on that. But it's safe to say the club have done a lot of business across the summer, and I think for as much as we spoke about it last year, the balance of the team now looks a lot better. The one area, however, and this is kind of my main criticism of the transfer window, if you can criticise a transfer window where your club spends £1.7 million on a midfielder, is the lack of a right back. Now, Christian Borkovic has played a little bit and looked pretty solid as a right wing back, pretty solid as a right back. However, he then picked up quite a bad injury, and that kind of curtails his time a little bit. There is a lot of talk that he should be back after this international break, which we're entering. But the lack of competition for that place has led us to playing Oisin McKenty at right back, as well as Michael Steinbender at right back. Two players that, don't get me wrong, I feel can be right backs in a back four and have shown they can be. However, with the back three and the midfield five, you need a right wing back, and neither of those players are capable of being a right wing back for me. So that's the one area. You spoke about Milne on the left-hand side. You could maybe level that on that side of the park as well, but I do feel like the right wing back was something that we maybe should have got done, but didn't. Whatever reason they didn't do it, I don't know. Like I say, maybe they were waiting to get some more players out before they went and got anybody else in. But it's the one area, and I asked a few people online for their ratings out of 10 for the transfer window, and I gave it a 7 and got criticised for that. So I'm gonna ask you, because I haven't asked you yet, what would you rate it out of 10?
I think the 7 that you've given is quite reasonable, to be honest. It might be slightly... See, again, it comes back to it's too early for me to say. I would probably agree with you, though, and hover around the 7 out of 10 area. I don't think that we have gotten rid of, like, a lot of those guys we talked about in terms of departures. A lot of those guys are the guys that we talked about all year last year as being the deadwood. We've gotten rid of a massive chunk of it. Yep. We've also made some good money from the Penrice sale, and we have invested that back in the squad with the new record-breaking signing. Not only did we break the record, we absolutely obliterated it. It's more than twice as much money as we had previously spent on a player for Agiu. I'm going to say 7.5. Am I allowed to do half points?
Yeah, go for it. I got slaughtered
I'll
for
give
7,
it
so let's bump it up a bit.
I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. I do think that the reliance on Borkovic concerns me. I think Borkovic, I was reading, he's due to be out for another 3 to 4 weeks, which means he's not going to make Rangers at Ibrox. I'm very concerned about the prospect of having Steinwender or McKenty at right wing back when we make the trip to Ibrox. Adam Forrester has gone back to St Johnstone today, so I mean, as I understand it, he can go back and forth as the season goes on. But I mean, when he was here, we weren't really using him, so I'm not really all that optimistic that he would actually be used. That really curtails for me the ability to give it any higher than a 7.5. We've made some great signings, and that's why it's not any lower than that. But until the Shvolov transfer, which has really helped, I think, with the goalkeeping crisis that we're in, because I do think we are in slight crisis there. Xander Clark has not been good this year. Yep. Craig Gordon, there's still no timeline on when he'll be back. Fulton is supposedly out long term. So we really did need to bring someone in to compete with Xander Clark. So the Shvolov transfer, that's massive as well. If it weren't for that, I probably would have dropped it below the 7. But yeah, it's been overall a good one. Time will tell on just how good.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the like I said, the cameos that we've seen, or the cameo that we've seen from Agu against Livingston, I watched him quite closely, and then I rewatched the game as I tend to do. And he looks like that creative midfield player that we've been crying out for, that boy that's just going to pick the ball up and just drive forward with it. And, we saw it in the Livingston game when Braga hit the post. It was a drive and run from Aguirre that was found by Shankland. And then the ball made its way to Braga. However, when you watch it again, Aguirre does go to pass it sideways to him when he's one-on-one with the goalkeeper. So he's obviously well aware that Braga is next to him and in a better position to score. So he's trying to get the ball to him. I would have liked to have seen him be a bit more selfish and try and dink it over the goalkeeper himself. But the fact that he passed it, there's an element of vision there that I really like, and I think has massively been missing. He also looks quite athletic and quite sort of aware of how to use his frame, and that's something that is very positive for me, because I think for a long time, whenever we've tried to have a number 10 sort of player, which is kind of what he comes across to me, but McInnes sort of said he's not a 6, an 8 or a 10, he can kind of play wherever he's asked to play because he's got the attributes to do that. But whenever we've tried previous players in there, you've had guys that just, it doesn't quite look like it's their natural game. George Grant was tried in there, Jan Danda's been tried in there, and obviously, they've both since departed. He looks quality, and I must stress the reported £1.7 million fee was reported because, of course, officially it was reported as our good friend undisclosed, our favourite term, undisclosed fee. However, media from abroad suggested 1.7 million with a 30% sell-on clause to his previous club, which that in itself indicates that they believe that this guy is going to be somebody that's going to go for big money, and they want a slice of it when it comes their way. So you can't blame them for that, and hopefully that does transpire, and that is what happens. But hopefully we get to enjoy him for at least a little bit yet, because I think he's definitely got a lot of ability. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a Rangers supporter, and he was suggesting he's the sort of player that looks like he could mix it with a Celtic or a Rangers, and I know that's maybe at the moment not the sort of compliment you want to be making, but they've always had quality players above what we have. So for us to have somebody there that they look at and go, he could probably play for us and not look out of place is quite a compliment. But yeah, as I say, the reason I gave the window a 7, and I'll kind of justify it because I feel like I have to. I gave the window a 7 prior to Aguirre's arrival, prior to the goalkeeper being announced, because I felt those were two areas that we hadn't addressed. Like you said, I thought Xander Clark has had a pretty poor season to start with, but I kind of equate that to not having adequate competition. As much as Liam McFarlane is a prospect, and as much as Harry Stone is a prospect, neither of those two are ready to be in goal for the Hearts first team, in my opinion. I'm not saying they will never be. I'm not saying that they're never going to be a number 1 at Hearts. I'm not going to say they're never going to challenge to play for Hearts. But Xander Clark was the number 1, and there was nobody touching him. And I think he knew that, to be honest. I think there's a comfortable, maybe a composure there, a complacency there rather. But Alexander Shvolov coming in, over 200 appearances in the Bundesliga, a decent level with decent clubs. There is a real challenge there now, and I think it'll be very, very interesting to see who gets the gloves for the Rangers game. Obviously, like I say, I'm sitting here saying we're having a 7 out of 10 transfer window when we've smashed our transfer record by a mile, which seems quite strange to say, but it was about time. And I think the signing of Agu, I know I'm kind of going back and forward here, but the signing of Agu for me, and the justification for paying what we paid for him, reportedly, I might add, Hibs broke their transfer record this season with £1 million striker. Aberdeen have spent big money. They brought Kevin Nisbet back on deadline day for a high 6-figure fee, and they've also secured a loan signing from a Bologna, a winger that his name escapes me completely. However, he was apparently linked with some Italian clubs just last year for fees of 6, 7, £8 million or €8 million. So there's obviously quality there as well. So I think the increase in quality of our rivals, I'm not saying that's what's forced Hearts to do it, because they were obviously wanting to do that deal, but it's nice to see clubs outside of Celtic and Rangers spending a bit of money and showing a bit of ambition.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm glad to see Hearts refusing to be left behind as well. You know, like we could well have watched Hibs break their transfer record. We could have seen Aberdeen spend all that money and say, we're good, we have what we need. We don't feel the need to spend for spending's sake. It's good to see Hearts say, well, you know, they're getting so much better and they're signing such talent that we need to be proactive and we need to spend better and get better talent in so that we don't get left behind. And some of the signings that we've made, I think, could prove to be, you know, enormous long-term successes. Like Braga's a guy who I could see being here for a few years and lighting the league on fire, and then getting a massive move somewhere, even if it's only for like a year or two that he's here. I think that we could potentially be offered big money for him. Ditto as you know, like he's a guy who, like you said earlier, like his previous club, they saw something in him and saw something in this deal that showed them an opportunity to make big bucks, not just now, but down the line as well. Like 30% of whatever we sell is going to go to them. And I would imagine that they're probably sitting rubbing their hands and thinking, you know, 30% of 4 million, 5 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Granted, we might not necessarily get that kind of money for him, but if his first cameo was anything to go by, early signs are pretty positive, and people pay top coin for creative midfield players. And if that's the player he is, and he's going to be, then we could make serious money on that guy.
Well, that's the thing. I think that kind of, I can't believe I've gone this far in a transfer window roundup without kind of talking about the Jamestown system. You know, that's what the system is. That's what the process is. And I made a joke about it on social media about, you know, Uncle Tony Express is in motion, but the money has been invested, and I fully expected Hearts to make some big money signings as we progressed further into the process and further on with the system. I did not expect us to spend that much money on one player immediately. You know, you kind of speculate to accumulate is the way I would have thought about it, and I still do. But you're ultimately bringing players in to then develop them and watch them flourish, and then, you know, move them on for big money and then reinvest, and the system goes on and on again. So yeah, like you say, if we have guys like that for 1 year, 2 years, if they're going for big money, you would suggest it's because they've been a success for us and they've done their talking on the pitch, and that's what we need. But yeah, listen, it's great. It's been a very good window, I have to say. I'm still going to rate it a 7. Come at me if you're not happy about that. But I asked a few people for comments on social media what their thoughts on the transfer window was. I opened it up to you, and please do let us know your thoughts in the comments in terms of your ratings for the transfer window. Or, do you know what? Slate me for a 7, slate John for a 7 out of the 7.5. Let us know what you think. But I just wanted to kind of rattle through a few of the responses I had. They're all quite similar to kind of what we've spoken about. But Andy Morris on Twitter, which I'm still calling it Twitter, I refuse to call it X because I just think that's daft. Andy Morris says, great window for us in terms of incomings. We have more threats now and much more depth. Right back apart, we have good quality cover all over the pitch. Squad is very bloated though, so we need to get some out on loan to the Championship. I'd imagine Forrester goes back to St Johnstone. Well, Andy, it sounds like that's already happened, so fair play. I think there are some other young players that I would like to see go out on loan. I think Finlay Pollock is potentially one that could be loaned out. The window for loans is still open, I believe. So there's Finlay Pollock, and one that I wanted to kind of touch on before I speak about the next social media comments, James Wilson. I don't know what James Wilson's pathway looks like now. I know Derek McInnes is a big fan. He's had some minutes, but there are strikers in front of him now. So does he stay and learn from this vast array of strikers that he's got in front of him? Or does he go to a loan to a Championship level where he'll get more game time? You know, we've obviously got the agreement with St Johnstone. I don't know if it means we can only send them one player, or, you know, if we have to be kind of limited to what we can and can't do with them. I feel like James Wilson, it's a big juncture for him at the moment, and I think this is a big part. Is he going to stay and fight for that place under Derek McInnes at Hearts, or is he going to go out and maybe drop down a level? People will have their thoughts whether that's going to be beneficial for him or not. But it's a very, very interesting point. What would you suggest if you were James Wilson? What would you do?
If I were James Wilson, I would be half as old as I am. So
I know, that's why I asked you.
I would be in much better shape. Is James Wilson somebody who might be better utilised off the wing on the left hand side? Who knows? I do feel like he has rapidly dropped to third or maybe even fourth choice in my view in terms of the striker options. You've got Shankland, obviously. You've got Braga. I do think that Kabore is somebody who is going to be utilised as a striker better, like we talked about on the last episode. Kabangu, probably, when he gets going, he'll probably be above Wilson in the pecking order in terms of the striker options. I'm not really sure, like yourself, where James Wilson's future lies in the short term. I do feel like maybe a loan move would be beneficial. I don't necessarily think that he would benefit from a drop in, the level though. Like if he were to go to a championship side, what's he going to learn? He's played for Scotland. He's already a Scotland international, and he's an SPL level player. He's shown himself to be quite handy in quite crucial games multiple times already. So I don't feel like a step down is going to really do him much good. Perhaps a move to England somewhere, like a League One side, that might help. But I really don't know. It's a bit of a conundrum.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that kind of the one sort of question of the window I still have is where does James Wilson fit? Obviously, we saw a lot of him last season, maybe more than we should have, maybe more than we ought to have, due to not having options in alternatives to Shankland. Obviously, now we have lots of alternatives to him, so it has added competition for James Wilson, and I think how he chooses to respond and how he chooses to deal with that will be a big part of him as a player and what we see from him. I'm not going to say Derek McInnes isn't going to use him, because he's used him this season off the bench already, and he started him already as well. So there's clearly minutes for him at Hearts if he wants them. But if there are other players that are showing more output, you're going to go with them, aren't you? You're going to go with a Claudio Braga ahead of a James Wilson, albeit James Wilson is the young homegrown kid. Braga's producing the goods on the pitch. He's going to get picked. That's just how it goes. So it'll be a very interesting one. Let us know what you think in the comments about James Wilson. And anything else you wanted to talk about, really. The next point that I'll make on the social medias, it was from friend of the podcast, Graham, GD on Twitter. His comment: it's been a great window and strengthening areas we needed to improve. Braga, clearly the standout so far, but breaking our transfer record for Aguiu was something nobody saw coming. Can't really have too many complaints. And the final one I just wanted to put out there, obviously they're all very similar because we're all talking about the same transfer window, we're all talking about the same players, and broadly we all have similar opinions. The last one I wanted to highlight was from HMFC France, and his point was: a great window overall, a squad a bit big, wouldn't be sad to see 2 or 3 players leaving. We need a real second right back if McInnes doesn't want to put Forrester in. Otherwise, very pleased with the arrivals and the new players thus far. I think like I say, we're all saying similar things. I think right back is an area that we need to look at if Borkovic comes back. It's the Borkovic situation. This is kind of the one player I wanted to talk about a little bit more. He's been labelled as injury prone. I'm not sure that that's accurate. He had 2 injuries at his previous club within a short period of time, and they were quite bad ones. He's come to Hearts, played a little bit, got an injury. There's people that have said he's injury prone because of that. There's people that have said he's not fit to, handle the physical nature of Scottish football, etc., etc. I don't want to subscribe to that, because I feel like if he was injury prone, Hearts wouldn't have touched him. There's obviously a reason we brought him to the football club, but it'll be interesting to see how he is when he comes back. And I think, like we said, that the real lack of a natural right wing back is something that could be an issue, and has been already in some games this season, because like I've said before, opposition teams have targeted that area. So that's the one concern I have after our transfer business. But the old adage keeps going round in my head: you can't fix every problem in one transfer window. and we have seen massive, massive squad overhaul. So do you know what? I'm going to cut the board a little bit of slack and say maybe a right back is something that we could revisit in January, or if Adam Forrester is back at St Johnstone, if he's doing well, perhaps we could bring him back. I don't know. We've already brought him back once, so why not bring him back again? And maybe do more than sit in the stand when he comes back. There's got to be a long-term strategy with the arrivals and departures, and I think loaning these young guys out to get them game time makes sense, as long as they come back and do something after that, having impressed on loan. Or in the case of Adam Forrester, if he goes to St Johnstone and does well, Hearts might go, that's your level, we're happy to let you go and play for them, because we don't feel you're a starter for us. I do feel, as I say, right back is something that they probably will revisit in January. I'd be surprised if they didn't, because Derek McInnes did speak about right back during the transfer window. So for us to not bring one in does seem a bit like they maybe dropped the ball a little bit on that one. But again, like I say, I'll cut them some slack on that.
Yeah, I do feel they dropped the ball. I think they dropped the ball in a big way outright with regards to right back. And I would argue, on the point about Borchgrevink, injury-prone athletes become injury-prone at some point, and it's from then on that they're injury-prone. And I fear that this has been the point that he has become injury-prone, to have two quite severe injuries in a short span of time, to then make a move and then almost immediately get injured and be out for weeks is concerning to me, especially given that the lack of a second option puts so much pressure and so much strain on Borchgrevink when he does come back. I do feel that we are gambling a bit on this guy who we really haven't seen enough of to suggest that he's capable of being the answer. And every injury that you get, it only makes you weaker. It's you can only come back from injury for so many times. So I do feel
unless you're Craig Gordon.
Unless you're Craig Gordon, yeah, he's currently rebooting as we speak. Craig Gordon, when he's in rehab, I always kind of think of RoboCop when he's sitting in the big chair and they've got everything all hooked up to him and all that, and that's kind of like what I picture Craig Gordon doing right now, with the faceplate off and it's just Craig Gordon's face and the RoboCop body.
Gone down a tangent there, but I like it.
There's the most awkward direction of your life, am I right? To get back to Borchgrevink swiftly, yeah, I do feel that we need a second option. I don't feel that McEntee is a horrible option at right back. I don't think he can play right wing back, and I think that his best position is so clearly midfield, and he's such a good asset there that taking him away from there weakens us there. So we do need to have him in that spot and have someone who is a natural right wing back at right wing back, a guy like, for instance, Forrester. We need that option there in case Borchgrevink doesn't work, because there is a possibility that he's not going to work. There is just as much chance that he will. It's likely that he might just come back and absolutely storm it from there out, and that will be great. I'm hoping that's the case. But there's a possibility that he's going to come back, be off the pace, get hurt again, and then come January, that right wing back spot is going to have cost us more games than we would like to think. So I do think they dropped the ball big time when it comes to right back. They did upgrade at goalkeeper. I think Schwolov is, a very solid signing, one that we've sorely needed. So not a disaster by any means, obviously. It's been a really good window. 7.5, which is what I gave it, is a really good score. That's what people need to remember. 5 out of 10 isn't a bad score. That's average. 7.5 out of 10 is very good. 8 and above is that's when it goes from great to excellent territory. So I feel like 7.5 is not a bad score. It's certainly not as bad a score as some people seem to be thinking it is, from what you've said. I'm going to stop rambling. Yeah.
Do you know what? It's one of those, your ramble allowed me to just double check something and I can't seem to find it now, and it's actually really annoying me. I saw a comment somewhere on social media. In fact, I've just found it there. It was from Sean Bailey on Twitter again, and he said, upon the announcement of Musa Drema leaving to join Portuguese League 2 side, He said, "What's wild is that some of our summer signings from last season, which we were all buzzing about, literally the only one left is Blair Spittle." And you touched on that previously in terms of the squad overhaul and turnaround.
Yeah.
We sat here almost a year ago waxing lyrical about some of the new players that we brought in and talked about how the balance of the squad looked good and that we were bringing in players that knew what they were doing. And then fast forward 12 months and Blair Spittle's the only one that's left. So, that shows you the turnaround that was needed from last season to this. And I think I kind of kicked off this segment of the transfer window review about talking about significant change from the board and Andrew McKinley speaking about the need for it and with the Jamestown involvement, etc. I think it's safe to say we've seen significant change. We've seen significant improvement in terms of number of points gathered. We are now entering that completely pointless first international break of the season, which is annoying because you start to build up a little bit of momentum and then you have an international break. But listen, for us, top of the table after 4 games, 10 points, can't grumble at that. It took us a long, long time last season to get to double figures in points, never mind 10. So yeah, it's certainly a lot of things are shaping up positively, and that's a big, big bonus for us. In terms of our next fixture, which I feel like we maybe should segue into, we have a trip to Ibrox to face Rangers on the 13th of September, just coming up on your screen there. I don't know about you. I have gone back and forward from looking forward to a trip to Ibrox and then remembering that whenever we seem to go along the M8, we seem to just forget how to play football and become Heart of Midlothian charity, a side that, if you're a struggling side, struggling to pick up 3 points, don't worry. Heart of Midlothian charity will roll into town and allow you to win your first game of the season. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that doesn't happen. Rangers at the moment seem to be a little bit of a shambles. I know they've done some business in the sort of closing stages of the January transfer window. They threw £8 million at an Everton reserve player who scored 4 goals in something like 50 games. They have done they brought in a few defenders and such. So they've clearly taken gambles. They brought in Bojan Majowski from Aberdeen. Not from Aberdeen, but previously of Aberdeen, who I think is a good signing for them if they can get them going. But they overall just look like a side lacking an identity, lacking a philosophy at the moment under Russell Martin. I don't quite see it yet. Hopefully that continues to be the case when we visit. It's annoying to have them after an international break because as much as we've said about Derek McInnes tinkering and changing things, you'd like to think during this international break the players that are still at the Oriam will have more time to adapt and McInnes will have more time to sort of get that system down. Russell Martin will have that time as well. So I've gone back and forward on how I think the game's going to go, but I feel like every time I do an Old Firm prediction or an Old Firm game preview, I always say the same thing. I want to see us go there, play with no fear and have a go. And I'm hoping that these new recruits, and it's an interesting point that I saw earlier, a lot of these new recruits obviously not coming from Scotland and not coming from within the Scottish football bubble, they come into this league with no fear. They come into this league with no preconceived ideas of Celtic and Rangers being the top 2 sides in the country and that they absolute arse falls out of them every time we play them. Which I think some of our players have that. I think some of our players in the past have had that where they kind of get a bit overawed because they see Celtic and Rangers as the pinnacle, whereas guys like Braga, guys like Kizaridis, guys like Agu are probably looking at these games and going, if I want to make a big money move, which is why you come to Hearts in the first place, impress in these games. Go out and do the business. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. Go out and put in your best and try and win us the game, try and get 3 points because that's how your profile improves. And I hope that's the mentality that we go into the game with, and I hope Derek McInnes and his coaching staff and the players that are at Hearts currently will tell these new guys how important these games are because they're massive, aren't they?
I mean, it's outside of the Hibs game, the Old Firm are the 2 biggest games you'll play as a Hearts player. It could even be argued from a player standpoint, and like you say, from a career standpoint, that Celtic and Rangers are even bigger than Hibs. If you look at the kind of money that you can make down the road if you impress in those stages, it is imperative that we defend properly, that we are tighter at the back, that we do not allow them as much space as we've been allowing other clubs. They will exploit that space, pish as they have been, like you say, Russell Martin has the same 2 weeks that we have to get these players up and ready for that. They are without a win this season in 4 games. That's unheard of in our generation for a Rangers side. So they will be absolutely desperate to get 3 points. Now, we can use that in our favour, or we could very quickly allow that to go against us, and it could be a doing. We really desperately need to defend properly. We need to take our chances, and we need to make sure that we don't do anything stupid, because it is going to be a hostile atmosphere at Ibrox, and the hostility won't be toward us. It will be toward Russell Martin. It will be toward his players. If we can put the pressure on them from early doors, then we have a chance. But if we bend over and let them kick our arses like we do so often, it's going to be a horrendous look. It really will. So it's very important that we play our best game. And it's the way I see it, McInnes has 2 weeks left to figure out what his first 11 is, because we need to have a first 11 on the pitch at Ibrox. It's the biggest game of the year so far, and by far.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think the one point that I kind of want to just add in as well is that in recent times, I know I said obviously we travel through in the M8 and we suddenly just, the arse falls out and we forget how to play football, but I will say the last couple of occasions we've played against Rangers, be it home and away, we have looked better. We have had better spells in those games, particularly I think it was the last time at Ibrox. I know we got beaten, however we had spells in that game where we played well, and you just hope that we build on that, because you said it earlier, the squad has quality within it. We have a very good group of players. We've assembled a very good group of players. They just need to deliver. And obviously, we've seen the first few weeks of the season, the scrappy performances, the comeback victories, which are all brilliant. Don't get me wrong, it's brilliant to celebrate a comeback win. It's brilliant to celebrate getting a point when you look like you're going to lose because you're 3-0 down at half-time. It's brilliant celebrating a last-minute winner. The Kiziridis, the passion that he showed when he celebrated that goal as well, just shows how much it meant to him. These are all brilliant things. However, like you've put across, you don't get those opportunities at Ibrox. We've seen it before where we've been out of a game after half-time and you're not coming back from that. We have to make sure that we stay in the game, and I think these are, you've said it before about these being the sort of games that Derek McInnes has been brought into Hearts for. And I think that sums this game up as well. I think the big games, I think it was the Aberdeen game we spoke about, this is why Derek McInnes came to the football club. This is why he was the man that was selected, because of that knowledge and that know-how of Scottish football. Derek McInnes' sides have done well in previous games against the Old Firm. He knows how to put out a team against them. So that's maybe something that we have to kind of factor in as well. I'm looking forward to it, and I think I'll be looking forward to it right up until kickoff. And then the fact will set in that we're at Ibrox and we'll probably, my arse will fall out rather than the players, I hope. But yeah, we will see. I'm gonna, before we wrap up this week, John, I'm gonna ask you for a prediction. I know the game is not for another 2 weeks, so feel free to be as vague as you like.
I think it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be the hardest game we'll have to play up to this point. However, Rangers have been pretty impotent in attack so far this season. There's a reason they're sitting 7th and they have 4 draws from 4 games. They were, I think, fortunate that Celtic haven't really started firing on all cylinders at the weekend. I think if Celtic's attack was really going, I don't think it would have been much of a challenge for Celtic, the Old Firm game. I'm going to stump for a 1-1 draw.
Okay, interesting. Well, I have a feeling that the Heart of Midlothian charity case may well rock up at Ibrox again. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right.
That's it's always the fear, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm sure that Ewan will be watching this and probably screaming at the screen saying, we're going to win, we're going to go and do them. But I am going to, unfortunately, go the opposite way. I am going to go for a Rangers win by 2-1. Again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we spend the next 2 weeks working on multiple new set piece routines and multiple new corner routines, because I feel like that could be a big element of how we could maybe nick something. But yes, folks, please do leave your comments in the description below. Try and give us your predictions and see what you think will happen at Ibrox. And yeah, as I said, we've spoken about a lot of topics in this week's episode: the transfer window, Livingston, and obviously the upcoming tie against Rangers. we've got some time to kill now before the next game, and due to our League Cup exit, we only have 2 games in September, which it is what it is. But yes, please do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Anything we've spoken about, feel free to fire them away. And as I said, slate us for our transfer window ratings, and give us your own as well. And let us know if you agree with us as well, please, because I had quite a few people suggesting that I didn't know what I was talking about. So I want some backup. And hopefully the context of this week's episode has provided my context as to why I rated it what I did. But yeah, if you don't agree, that's fine. Let me know down below. And yeah, we'll. I don't know in terms of when we'll be back next. Obviously, with the international break, regular listeners and watchers of the podcast will know that this is not an international football zone. The international football doesn't exist over here. So I think it's going to be a hiatus for a couple of weeks, I would imagine. But we may well be back before that, but we shall see. If not, you'll see us for a Rangers review episode and a preview for the games ahead. But thanks as ever for listening and watching, and thanks yourself, John, for joining me this evening as well.
Thanks for having me, man. Let's do it again a couple of weeks from now, and hopefully we'll have something positive to talk about.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be basking in a comfortable Hearts win in our first marquee landmark victory of the season as we march towards winning the Premier League.
Although don't get me wrong, I would take another last minute winner. Anything that we can get off them at Ibrox, I think, will be a positive. I don't want us to get a doing, because if we get a doing, that could unravel the early progress that we've made this year. I really do feel that way. We've seen it happen before, where we go on a lengthy run. It happened this earlier in 2025, in the second half of last season. We went on quite a lengthy run of being unbeaten, and we played Rangers, and we outplayed Rangers. I think we had something along the lines of 20 shot attempts, and we lost that game. Remind me, was it 3-1?
Yeah, that's the game I couldn't remember the score.
It was 3-1 or 3-0. It was either 3-1 or 3-0, and I was characteristically not particularly happy about that, because I feel that if you have 20 opportunities to score in a game, you should score more than a couple of them, and you should not be losing a game by multiple goals. So that's the last thing that I want to see happen. Fingers crossed we can go there and do a job and get something out of it. We need to defend better, though. It's imperative.
Well, here's hoping the Uncle Tony Express rolls into Ibrox and rolls out with 3 points. That would be a nice way to continue our charge towards the top of the table. But yes, folks.
He might find some free agent right wing back from some far flung corner in his pocket to bring in by then.
Maybe we shall see, and if he does, we'll come back to talk about it, because that would be certainly news to discuss.
We'll have to we'll reappraise our transfer window scores, I think, if that happens.
If we somehow manage to pull a right wing back out of somewhere, it's a 10 out of 10 window for me. But yeah, folks, I am going to leave 100%. It there. We are going to leave it there this evening, and thank you as ever for watching, listening. Like I always say, your support is massively, massively appreciated. As ever, take care, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Bye, folks.